cool. Did everybody get an Oculus this year? An Oculus, by the way, for the non-technically inclined, is a virtual headset reality made by Facebook, or now the company formerly called Facebook, which is now Meta.
Hmm.
And Brian's talking about the metaverse, of course. But I swear I'm rolling through Facebook, and I swear, like, just so many people unboxed Oculuses this year at Christmas. And so I post on Facebook, oh my God, did everybody get Oculus this year? And then I think that was Sunday. When the market opens on Monday, there was some report. I didn't flag it on our Flipboard channel, I don't think, but the market would respond somehow. Some analyst or some metric was uncovered, and Facebook or Meta's stock price had a big, I think, like a 14% bump for the day.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it was all over Facebook and all sorts of video fails of people running into stuff and
Right.
falling off balance beams and all that kind of stuff. But so it's funny. There's a Facebook group. It's I forget what it's called. It's Oculus for those folks 40 and older or something like
Oculus for
that. So
40 and
it's like
over.
yeah, yeah. So it's kind of funny because you get some, you get like some 60-year-olds in there or whatever who want to do something like to connect with their, kids or grandkids or whatever. Or maybe it's out of necessity, I guess, to, if they can't be together in person, they're just looking for different solutions or fun ways to connect. But
So
but that's an interesting group.
do you have an Oculus?
I don't. I don't.
I picked one up. The Oculus Quest 2 is the latest and greatest. I get, it's not the greatest, I guess, from a spec standpoint, but it's the latest from Facebook. Anyways, I got it when it came out, just after it came out. I think it came out in October of 2020. I got it somewhere maybe February, March, April, sometime this year, I think. And I got it because I kind of had this idea. I'm like, the kids were still not back at school full time. They were still struggling, I think, with the hybrid and the remote, or they were fully remote. And it occurred to me, I was like, wow, the kids were struggling with trying to be in a classroom environment on their laptop or their Chromebooks, and it was just it was a horrible experience. And I thought to myself, if we had an Oculus headset and we gave the classroom a 360 camera, and I was like, I went through it all in my head. I'm like, I'm gonna test it, and I'll bring it to the school and see if they'll try this early adoption. But I was like, thinking that we could put a 360 camera in the classroom. The teacher could be in the classroom giving instruction, and the kids could connect with the VR headset, because there is a 360 YouTube thing where you're in the Oculus headset, and of course it's head tracking, and you're watching a YouTube video that you're effectively in real time. And sadly, that didn't go anywhere, but it's obvious to see that's where it's going. We'll be able to attend concerts and trade shows and all sorts of kind of public mass functions, maybe even a movie.
Hmm.
You could be in a virtual movie theater. In fact, I think they have a virtual movie theater app where you can feel like you're sitting and looking around chairs around you and things.
Right, right. And they may have immersive videos where you're still in a theater setting, but the movie is still playing essentially, you're like in that world, so to speak,
Yeah.
come up with some sort of creative, solutions like that. I remember, um, I think that the NBA is usually pretty good on all of this stuff with they're doing NFTs with their Top Shot program and all that sort of stuff. But they've had for a while now the virtual games where you can essentially get courtside
Oh,
seats and
nice.
move with the action and
Oh,
stuff
just what
like
I'm
that. But
describing, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. So on the TV, obviously when you're watching it, you're looking at whatever camera view they give you. But if the action's at one end of the court and you turn your head to the opposite end, you can look at the court with nothing going on, or look
Yeah.
at something, the coach's reaction on that sideline or whatever. So so that is a pretty immersive experience. And I think you can even, on a lot of those turn around and just look at the fans or look back up into the crowd. So yeah, I mean that stuff's here. It's very much a now thing.
I think the Oculus Quest 2 from Facebook might have been so popular because it's the first standalone VR headset that's kind of small enough to feel like it's approachable for everybody, which is kind of exciting because the old VR headsets, you needed to be plugged into a computer. You had a cord coming from your head and going to a computer. They're big and bulky and heavy. And this one, the Oculus 2, is still pretty bulky, but if this is where it is today, you can imagine another 10 years, these things will really continue to downsize and get smaller. I mean, even Apple is rumored to be working on a VR, AR, augmented reality pair of glasses that you just wear all day. And, like an Apple Watch pairs with your phone and with heads up displays and reading real time information. So it's definitely going that way.
Yeah, I was one of the early adopters to the ones where you put your cell phone inside, and
Oh,
you
the Google
connected it that
Cardboard.
way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah. So that was not a bad experience. You had to download the app, then you plugged your phone in, and the downside there was obviously you're a slave to the battery life of your phone.
Right.
So if that's a full on experience with your phone, I mean that's going to drain a lot of resources from your phone, but yeah, I mean, the idea of a standalone sort of piece that and with all this stuff, it feels like early on one of the key limitations is going to be the battery life. Whether it's a car or a phone or Oculus. I mean,
Battery
it's
in bulk, right? I mean, even the early
yeah.
car phones. I don't know. Did you have a car phone in the '90s that was like a
No,
suitcase?
no,
My
no, I
friend,
didn't.
my friend did. His mom had one in the car. I remember it was like a suitcase with like a leather strap, and it was, yeah. But bulk and battery is always kind of the limiting factor when it comes to tech, and it always gets smaller and faster, which is cool. So with that
Right.
leads us. Should we do any predictions? Do you have any predictions on 2022 on whether business trends or finance trends or technology trends?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, last time we talked a little bit about, potentially the breakup of some of these big organizations.
Mm.
I think that could be a trend. I think I don't know if you've got something you can go ahead. I got a couple things, but I'm working through them in my head.
Well, I mean, you alluded to the breakup of big tech as
Hmm.
the buzzy keyword. So there
Yeah.
the liberal left governments, both the U.S. and Europe, they're beating the drum that quote unquote big tech is too big, and there's talk of breaking up Facebook, which owns Instagram, WhatsApp. And they think that those companies should be broken up and run independently of each other, and because it's unfair to market competition, and maybe they're harvesting too much information on all of us. you know I I'm a free market capitalist. I think it's whenever you try to break up big companies, all they do is they reconsolidate just in another 20 or 50 years. That's what the phone companies did. Ma Bell in the mid 1900s consolidated and was this behemoth, and then I think in the 70s or something they broke them up. They forced it to break up, and then all these little phone companies took their little kingdoms all over the country and stuff, but they just coalesced around, and we call them Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile now. And it was T-Mobile and Sprint, but Sprint and T-Mobile just merged. So anyways, I think these breakup tactics of breaking up a company is more political maneuvering, and political ideological feel good for people. It's bizarre, because companies in fact break up on their own. They choose
Hmm.
to downsize, and they choose to separate from some of their sectors and divisions, so that they can have kind of unencumbered focus. One of them, for example, is a password manager that we like and recommend our clients get, called LastPass. it's not even a plug. It's just a product. It was bought up. LastPass was an independent company. It got bought up by this company called LogMeIn, which sells remote access tools for computer users. And LogMeIn is buying up all sorts of products in the IT space. And I just saw a notice, I think last week or two, that they are spinning LastPass back out into its own company. And so there's reasons to consolidate, and there's reasons to break up. And anytime the government tries to micromanage that, I honestly, ultimately, they do it in the name of consumer protection, but I think in general, it just adds to cost and governance and complexity, and it's whatever. So that's interesting. You said that, big tech breakup. So that's one prediction. Will Facebook be broken up? Will Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp be broken up? I don't know. What else?
Yeah, and Amazon, but in
Amazon,
AWS
right? Right.
is that's one they always talk about, or even Google and YouTube or something like that.
Microsoft. They
So
talk about Microsoft too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, any of the stuff where you can split, hardware and software or something like that kind of feels like an easy way to go for the layman. They can sort of, it's like, well, why don't they, spin off Xbox into a separate division or something like that.
But if you,
Um,
I mean, look at GE for example. Do you know anything about GE?
yeah, sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
GE is a massive, massive conglomerate. Massive. There's no call to break them up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, they're not even that big anymore, but they've sold off all the good pieces. But yeah, at one time, certainly there was. Yeah.
So all this call to break up businesses, you know what I mean? It's like it's just
Hmm.
political maneuvering. It's all showmanship. I mean, it's all in the name of this and in the name of that. But it's like, you know what? There's actually a fiscal imperative that for even massive companies to continue being good, because so long as there's a free and fair market, unencumbered by regulation,
Hmm.
um, a startup can come up and disrupt a market or an industry. Look at Tesla.
Hmm.
Tesla completely is upending the auto industry, in spite of anti-competitive regulation.
Hmm.
It's in many states, 17 states, and it was more and more and more states are walking this regulation back. But in many states, it was illegal for an auto manufacturer to sell their cars direct to consumers. Imagine Ford produces a car, comes off the assembly line. They couldn't sell it directly to you. They had to sell to the consumer through a dealer network. And believe it or not, I mean, when I read this and kind of discovered this, because none of us really thought about it necessarily over the last 50 years. You just went to a dealer for new or used, and you went to a used for used, right? But yeah, it's actually illegal in many states for Tesla to sell direct to us their cars, and that's anti-competitive legislation, or legislation for the consumer market. Of course, it's all in the name of, when cars were first manufactured, they didn't have service centers and support, the service network to support these really expensive purchases. So, I mean, I get kind of why it passed, because it was in the name of consumer protection, but it was kind of anti-competitive, because if you were a new car startup, you couldn't sell your cars direct to consumer. And there was a car in the mid-century, a startup called Tucker, and there was a movie that was made about it. It was pretty good, and I wonder if that was why he ultimately failed, because of that. But anyways, Tesla, startup
Right.
disrupting a well-established industry.
Yeah, the car industry is a good example, right? I mean, you had the big three for so long, and it was, a question of do the big three stifle innovation, stifle competition? But then eventually it was the foreign automakers that rolled in, right? So, your Volkswagens, your Toyotas, your Hondas, that's what was ultimately
Right.
the disruptor. It didn't come from inside the US, and that was the automobile industry is one that consolidated big time. I mean, obviously the first half of 1900s, but
Right.
and you think about all the different brands they would have underneath them, right? I mean, Plymouth and Dodge and
Right.
Chrysler were all, a lot of times making the exact same vehicle and
Right.
slapping different emblems on the back, just to keep the loyalty to those brands. But
Just
yeah, I
pro-
mean that is a perfect example.
just proves my point. It's just that you don't need necessarily the regulations to try to create a competitive market. You just need the landscape so that anybody can come up, make a better product, and sell it. you
Mhm.
know, so I mean, Microsoft sat on their laurels when they put Netscape out of business when they bundled Internet Explorer with Windows 95. They enjoyed that for 5 or 10 years until Internet Explorer just became such a laggard web browser, and Firefox, a free and independent product, came up, and just all of a sudden Firefox was on everybody's desktop in the mid to late aughts, and now so anyways, yeah, it's just kind of like governments need to just kind of support the law of contracts and just kind of get out of the way, give or take. So protect the environment. Don't let these companies, destroy our environment. And other than that, speaking of environment, I one thing I'm thinking of lately is I don't know. Um, there's this all we're all environmentally conscious now, um, and we're all about cleaning up the seas and things. But what still strikes me is why the masses kind of aren't yet emotionally angry at the millions of plastic bottles, for example, that are being produced by like Pepsi and Coke and things like that. It's all like let's get out there and clean up the oceans, but we're still buying our Dasani and our Fuji water or whatever. And I don't know. I wonder and hope if if eventually the masses will kind of look at the source of the problem, and
Mhm.
start kind of becoming emotional about like not feeling fond of these companies that are polluting like that.
Yeah, well, I've always said that. I mean, there's too much focus on the idea of recycling, but if you're really true to the environment, the idea is to not create it in the first place, right?
Right.
It's not to make all these plastic bottles and then recycle them. It's just to use reusable bottles in the first place and not go down that path. But I thought of something when we were talking about the competitive nature and stuff. So we usually think about that from a product perspective and innovation, but how about from an employee standpoint now? So there's these big, Silicon Valley wars between Apple and Facebook, and they're trading employees back and forth. But you could look at the idea of breaking up some of these companies as an opportunity for employees. If you're a high level tech person at this point, I mean, you obviously have the ability to start your own company if you wanted to, but I mean, you're really only looking at three or four big players, right, in that space. So I think that's something too that if you want to play a little bit devil's advocate to the free market system, is that you're sort of limiting potential movement among these high level employees. I was just reading the article between Facebook and Apple about them. Apple came out with a big bonus program this year just because they've lost so many employees to Facebook. So they were giving out like, somewhere between 50 and $180,000 bonuses to
Wow.
some of their top tech people just because they had, Facebook basically it's came in there and was just writing blank checks to people to get people to come over. And you think about all the trade secrets and stuff that go with people. I mean, obviously you sign non-disclosures and all that kind of
Right,
stuff,
right,
but
right.
still, I mean, you can't erase what's in your brain already, right? So you think about the information flowing back and forth, but just
Yeah.
something else to think about.
I mean, I don't know if I don't agree with that argument. I think the world is filled with viable work and viable technologies, and you know if Apple bought Facebook and Facebook bought Microsoft, and they become one, if Silicon Valley just became one company again, as long as people are allowed to move around the
Hmm.
country and move around the world, and participate in free and open commerce, and they can start their own companies, or they can go, there's European companies, there's Asian companies, so I think I don't want to spar with you over it, or step on your toes, but respectfully, I think that it's kind of those false narratives that give the argument, or the give it gives wind in the sails of, I think, troublesome legislation that I think is in good spirit. We want a competitive market, but I think a competitive market is naturally occurring. Um, time and time again, we see that there's laws that exist, like these dealership laws. Like you can see that why you would maybe say, okay, you can't sell a car unless you have a dealer network, because this is a significant purchase for a household. And if they make this purchase and they can't get this purchase supported, they might bankrupt their household with a purchase of a car. You imagine this maybe in the 20s or the 30s or something. I mean, even now to a lot of households, a car purchase is significant to them. But you know, again, when you say it in the name of consumer protection, it's easy to justify some acts. But I think sometimes it doesn't always, it's not functionally productive inside.
Right. And in the case of employees, I mean, it becomes an issue, not necessarily an issue now, because it is a competitive situation, right? I mean, it's a good thing that they're competing over employees, or, and one's got to give huge bonuses to keep them away from the other. That's a good thing. But if it ever got to the point where there was some sort of collusion and they were banding together and said, "Hey,
they already proved that was
right,
happening."
right, yeah. I mean, it's certainly going the other way, but just bringing up different sides of a potential issue down the road.
I can appreciate that,
yeah,
and just edit out all of this political talk just so I don't alienate myself.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a political discussion, because you've heard people on the right talk about breaking up Facebook because they're
True.
Limiting free speech, because
Right.
they're going down the path of trying to monitor misinformation, which could come from both sides.
Right. True point.
And nobody likes to be monitored. So you're seeing that as more of kind of a penalty, or like they're infringing on our right for free speech. But
right.
So,
that's the problem with the left and the right is that's the problem with not being a principled individual, or having a political ideology rooted in principles, because the right, perfect example, the right wants to shut down or break up Facebook because they won't let their spokesman on their network, and the left wants to break them up because the left has co-opted somehow this neo hippie movement where money and capitalism is evil. So yeah, it's everybody just needs to calm down and just get out of the way and just let the system do what it does naturally. People are gonna, companies are gonna rise because they make better products, or they've enjoyed some competitive advantage for some period of time. When they become complacent, a replacement will come up and rise and do the same thing. Facebook did it to MySpace. Microsoft, Tesla did it to the auto industry. I mean, it just happens over and over and over again, and it's just part of what a free market and economy does.
Right. Yep.
So
we're coming up on the. Yeah, go ahead.
No, we're running long, aren't we?
No, I mean, just coming up on the hour mark.
All right.
We're about 55 minutes, so
I was just about to go into solar versus coal power. So I don't think we have the time for that. But
no, not likely. No. Well, let's wrap up. Spend a couple minutes about. So we started this right just after Thanksgiving, right? So we're going into the new year. We're doing live here. We're fixing audio and video issues and getting some transition here. So I think we had said about 10 shows it'll probably take us to nail everything down. So the fact that we're about 4 or so in, I think we're on track, or at least ahead of schedule, I think.
I'm feeling good. I've been wanting to launch this channel with a partner for years, and I've solicited a number of partners, and it's hard to find somebody who will put themselves out there and kind of participate in the video internet ecosystem. So honestly, I've come to enjoy you as a friend, and I'm really enjoying co-hosting the show with you. And I think it's completely serendipitous that it was like a dart in the dark. I sent you a message on LinkedIn
Yeah.
a few weeks ago, and I said, hey, this is what I want to do. I saw your YouTube channel. You've got great content that you're putting out on your own channels and projects. And hey, I'm just so glad that you seem to be enjoying me, and you seem to be enjoying this channel. And I'm looking forward to 52 shows, hopefully 53 if you allot one for error or two.
Yeah.
Hopefully we won't forget to hit the record button on too many more.